The Vietnam War is the United States' longest military engagement and one of the most disruptive conflicts in its history. It deeply divided the American populace, creating a bitter rift between those who supported and those who opposed the war. However, the roots of this war can be traced back several decades. Vietnam, a small nation in Southeast Asia, was colonized by France in the late 1800s. The French ruled over Vietnam for almost a century until Japan's occupation during World War II in 1941. During this tumultuous period, a leader named Ho Chi Minh emerged, founding the Viet Minh, also known as the League for the Independence of Vietnam. Seeking autonomy from foreign powers, the Viet Minh aligned themselves with the United States in their fight against the Japanese occupation. In 1945, the Viet Minh successfully fought and overthrew the Japanese with support from the United States. This victory, however, marked only the beginning of a complex and protracted struggle for Vietnam's independence. The subsequent events would ultimately lead to the involvement of the United States in the Vietnam War. During World War II, many Vietnamese saw their resistance against the Japanese occupation as an opportunity to liberate their homeland from French colonial rule. In 1954, the Viet Minh, determined to free Vietnam from foreign influence, compelled the French troops stationed at Dien Bien Phu to surrender after an intense 56-day battle. The humiliating defeat suffered by France led to their complete withdrawal from Vietnam. Following the French departure, an international conference was held, resulting in the temporary division of Vietnam into two separate nations. North Vietnam came under the governance of Ho Chi Minh, a communist leader who played a prominent role in the country's struggle for independence. In contrast, South Vietnam was led by Ngo Dinh Diem, a fervent anti-communist. This division set the stage for the subsequent conflicts and power struggles shaping the Vietnam War. The stark ideological differences between the communist-led North and the anti-communist South laid the foundation for a deeply divided nation, with opposing forces vying for control and influence over Vietnam's future. Many Americans harbored deep concerns about the spread of communism, viewing it as a threat to democracy and global stability. Consequently, the United States pledged its support to South Vietnam. President Dwight Eisenhower believed that if Vietnam fell to the communists, it would set off a chain reaction with neighboring nations following suit. This theory became known as the domino theory. Tensions between North and South Vietnam intensified, and the communist forces grew increasingly frustrated with their inability to unify the country. In 1959, communists in the South initiated an armed revolt against President Diem and his government, forming the National Liberation Front, commonly known as the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong quickly assembled armed fighters and commenced a guerrilla campaign targeting government-controlled villages in South Vietnam. This marked a critical turning point in the Vietnam War, as the conflict escalated from ideological divisions to an active armed struggle with South Vietnam. The Viet Cong's guerrilla tactics posed significant challenges to the South Vietnamese government and its American allies, drawing the United States deeper into the conflict. As the war progressed, it became clear that a protracted and complex conflict was underway, with grave implications for the people of Vietnam and far-reaching consequences for international relations. In 1961, John F. Kennedy assumed the presidency of the United States amidst escalating violence in Vietnam. Troubled by the situation, Kennedy felt compelled to assist the Vietnamese people. However, President Diem was losing support within South Vietnam due to his repressive policies, including imprisoning critics. As the violence continued, Kennedy and his advisors began to question the effectiveness of the South Vietnamese government under Diem's leadership. They concluded that Diem was not the right person to combat communism successfully. In August 1963, Diem declared martial law, imposing military rule and launching a crackdown on communist activities. Outraged by these actions, Kennedy quietly conveyed to South Vietnamese officials that he would not interfere if they decided to overthrow Diem. In November 1963, military leaders staged a coup, assassinating Diem and seizing government control. Tragically, just 3 weeks later, Kennedy was assassinated, and Lyndon B. Johnson assumed the presidency. These dramatic events further destabilized South Vietnam, setting the stage for political uncertainty and shifting alliances. The fall of Diem marked a critical turning point in the Vietnam War, with the United States now grappling with the challenge of finding a new approach to address the communist threat while mourning the loss of their leader. Following President Diem's assassination, South Vietnam's government descended into a state of increasing instability. Military coups became a recurring pattern, with one leader replacing another quickly, only lasting a few months in power. Amidst this political turmoil, the South Vietnamese forces steadily lost ground to the Viet Cong, the communist guerrilla fighters. Recognizing the dire situation, the White House under President Lyndon B. Johnson intensified its support for South Vietnam. In the summer of 1964, the United States received reports indicating that North Vietnamese ships had launched an attack on a U.S. Navy vessel in the waters of North Vietnam. This incident, known as the Gulf of Tonkin incident, would have significant consequences for U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. President Johnson sought congressional authorization to take military action in response to the reported attack. He claimed that these aggressive acts by North Vietnam threatened peace and security in the region. In August 1964, the U.S. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting Johnson broad powers to use military force in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. With the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, the United States escalated its military involvement in Vietnam. This marked a turning point in the conflict as American troops were sent to support the South Vietnamese forces against the Viet Cong. The U.S. military presence grew rapidly, as did the scale of operations. However, years later, revelations emerged challenging the initial narrative of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. It was revealed that the reported second attack on the U.S. Navy ship, which had been used to justify the resolution, may not have occurred. These revelations fueled debates and controversies surrounding the legitimacy of the US's actions and the justifications for expanding military engagement in Vietnam. Nevertheless, the Gulf of Tonkin incident did play a pivotal role in shaping the war's course. It gave the US the legal framework and public support needed to escalate its military intervention. The conflict, which began as an effort to support South Vietnam against communist insurgents, would evolve into a large-scale and protracted war that engulfed the region and deeply divided American society. While controversial in retrospect, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was an important event that set in motion a series of other events leading to an intensification of US involvement in Vietnam. It marked a significant shift in the nature and scale of the conflict, with far-reaching consequences for both the US and Vietnam. In the wake of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, President Lyndon B. Johnson wasted no time taking decisive action. On August the 8th, he ordered immediate airstrikes against North Vietnam in response to the reported attack on the US Navy ship. This marked a significant escalation of the conflict, with the US directly engaging in military operations against North Vietnam. The US Congress swiftly passed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution to support this military escalation. It granted President Johnson the authority to take all necessary measures to repel any attack by the North Vietnamese. With this authorization, the president began deploying tens of thousands of American troops to fight in the challenging terrain of the South Vietnamese jungles, cities, and rivers. American troop commitment shifted from advisory to full-scale military intervention in the Vietnam War. Loss of faith in Diem's leadership led to political instability and a coup overthrowing him, exacerbating South Vietnam's instability. With the removal of Diem from power, subsequent South Vietnamese governments faced a series of challenges. A succession of military coups ensued, resulting in frequent leadership changes, each lasting only a few months. This constant upheaval weakened the South Vietnamese government's ability to combat the Viet Cong insurgency effectively. The overthrow of Diem and the subsequent political instability created a volatile environment in South Vietnam, hampering the government's efforts to address the Viet Cong threat and fueling disillusionment and discontent among the population. These factors played a significant role in shaping the course of the war and contributed to the increasing difficulty the US faced in achieving its objectives. The US's commitment to the Vietnam War was firmly established. The combination of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, and the deployment of American troops marked turning points in the conflict, setting the stage for years of intense fighting and a deeply divisive period in American history. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to our channel for more thought-provoking discussions. Don't forget to share, like, and leave your comments below.